you. So first of all, I want to thank the organizer for this invitation. It's nice. It's always a pleasure to be here. It's quite impressive place. And I have to say that this is joint work with Francis, so you might know him. And as Sylvain taught, he's going to be on zeroth order stochastic optimization. And the our main assumption is that we are going to focus on functions. So we want to do optimization of convex functions that are very, very smooth. So you see later what I mean by that. And well, that's it. Okay, so what's our motivation? So as the title suggests, we have lots of keywords in this title. All of them has a different meaning. And what we want to do is classical convex optimization. That's the main idea. So we have a mapping F, which is convex, of course, and we want to optimize it. And we're going to assume some regularity on this function. That is typically that it is either smooth or non-smooth. And I don't know if anybody is that familiar with the vocabulary of convex optimization. So we just remind you a bit on all the keywords that we use. The mapping we use F can be, we say that it's non-smooth if we have some kinks on it. So since, for instance, as the hinge loss, or it can be smooth. Smooth if typically all its second derivatives are bounded. So, but typically in machine learning, when you're looking at a function that you want to optimize, if you take the logistic regression or if you want to minimize the square norm, your functions are not only smooth. If you compute the second derivatives, they are bounded. They're not only smooth, they are really, really smooth. So for instance, if you take the square norm, so I have a clicker. If you take the square norm and you take the second derivative, it's bounded. The third derivative is 0. So all the third, the fourth, and so on, all the derivatives are bounded by 0. And this is the same thing for the logistic regression. So here we say, okay, we typically are going to we aim at optimizing convex functions that are smooth, but we don't use the fact that they are really smooth. The question is, can we use this higher degree of smoothness to improve rates of convergence? And well, that's the main topic of this talk. So as I say, we're going to use look at stochastic optimization. That means that when you're when you're going to make queries, you get noisy feedback. So for instance, let's assume that your mapping F you want to optimize is the Euclidean distance, the expected distance between your estimator theta and the true parameter theta. Actually, you don't have access to, when you query F, you don't have access to this value, you don't have access to F of something, because you only get an estimate, so you get a random, you get some noise, you get some random feedback on this mapping. So you just observe or compute the norm between theta hat and theta, and you don't get to see this expectation. So that's where the stochasticity appears. We have noise. And so what's our objective? So as I said, we want to optimize, so we want to do stochastic optimization of a convex function. So this is an optimization algorithm. How does this work? So you have this unknown mapping F that you want to minimize. So you have a constraint set X, a subset of RD that you know it. And let's see how it works. So when you're doing optimization, you're going to query your first point. So you say, okay, what's the value of, so you're going to query X1. And typically you get some feedback. The feedback you can get, it can be different depending on what's your computational power. For instance, you can get either the Hessian of, you can get the Hessian of F, and then you can do a Newton step, Newton descent, Newton method, if you can do it. Or maybe if you have less computational power, you will only have access to a gradient of F. You can compute the gradient of your function. Or if you have even less computational power, maybe you will just get the value of F. And in all this assumption, every time you get the value of something, it's noisy. So either you get the value of F plus some noise, or the gradient of F plus some noise, or the Hessian plus some noise. And here, the title suggests that we're going to look at zeroth order method. Zeroth order means that you don't have access to the gradient nor the Hessian because it's too difficult to compute. You cannot do it. You will just have access to the value of your function. So let's go back to the typically optimization algorithm. So you make the first query, X1. Then you get a feedback, which is the value of F at X1 plus some noise. Based on this, what you're going to do is you're going to output what you think is the minimum of your mapping F. And we'll call this X star 2, okay? X star 2 is what you think is the minimum of F. If you're lucky and you can query a second point, you can make a second query, then you will query a second query. So you're going to make this second query, x2, you will get your feedback. So in this example, f of x2 plus c2. You're going to output x star 3, which is what you think is the minimum of f, and so on and so forth. And the idea of an optimization is to minimize your optimization error, which is the difference between what you think is the minimum of f after t steps. So it's x star of t plus 1 minus the minimum of f star. So that's what we want to do. We want to aim at building a good algorithm, optimization algorithm, that solves things like this. So why I am mentioning all this almost common knowledge on optimization is because actually the title, the first word of the title, I think, well, maybe not the first one, I don't remember which one actually. It's the last but one word of the title says online. So what's online optimization? So online optimization is exactly the same thing as the classical stochastic convex optimization, except that the mapping f that you want to optimize, so it's still a convex mapping, but it can change through times. It's not always going to be the same one, f, but when you make the first query, it's going to be f1, then it's going to be f2 and 3 and 4 and so on. And typically, so we have, as I said, we have a sequence of mapping. We don't have just one mapping, f. We have a sequence of mapping, f1, f2, f3, and so on and so forth. And when you make a query x1, you get as feedback f1 of x1. Or if you have enough computational power, you can get the gradient of f1 at x1, or the Hessian of f1 at x1. But here in our settings, we're going to assume that we can only compute the value of, we are going at 0 further. That means that you only get as feedback f1 of x1. So the setting is exactly the same. You query x1, you get f1 of x1. You output x star 2, which you think is the minimum of f2. And then you query x2, you get the feedback f2 of x2. Then you output x star 3, and so on and so forth. And while in classic convex optimization, we're looking at the optimization error, which is f of the guess minimum of your function minus f star. Here we are going to look in this online scenario at a criteria which is weaker than this, which is called the regret. So Emily spoke about this in the last talk. The regret is that thing. And typically you compare, so you have a sequence of mapping, f1, f2, and so on and so forth, up to ft, and you compare the minimum over all your x of the cumulative loss of x star. So you take the cumulative loss, the average loss, and you're looking at the point that minimizes this average loss. And you compare this quantity to the cumulative loss you incur by outputting x star t at stage t. So that's the rate, the difference between the cumulative loss minus the best loss in insight, which means if you knew in advance the average function f, you will have predict x star at each stage. So here's just a disclaimer. This is not exactly a bandit. For those that knows what is bandit convex optimization, this is not bandit because in bandit we typically assume that x star k is equal to xk. And here I just assume that x star k has to be in the constraint set. I can query my function anywhere, wherever I want. Okay, it does not have to be in the constraint set x. So here, so that slide was just to define what is online optimization. But to be precise, from now on, I will not speak about online optimization at all. Okay, it was just to mention that I can do it. And actually, so we'll see the results. All the results we have in classical convex optimization holds for online optimization for free. And then typically we'll see, I mean, we just show one slide of proofs, and you'll see why everything that I said, all of the results in convex optimization holds for online optimization. And actually, to be even more precise, you will see why online optimization is actually simpler than convex optimization, in some sense. Okay. So in the title, we have, so I had this long title. Here I just spoke about convex optimization, online optimization, stochastic optimization. And in the title, I made precise assumption. The first one is, so in the title, I had the assumption of smoothness, and we also going to make another assumption on the convexity of our mapping. So this is rather classic in convex optimization. We can assume So we have two types of assumptions that helps us to solve a convex notization problem. The first type of assumption is that f is mu strongly convex, and the second one is f is too smooth. As you can see, this is more or less the same assumption, except that one sign here is bigger. It's bigger than zero, bigger or equal to, and or less or equal to. Okay, so that's kind of the dual condition. So the first one is what we call being mu strongly convex. And typically, it says in one dimension, your convex mapping that you want to optimize is going to be strongly convex, mu strongly convex, if the second derivative is bigger than mu. So you know that any convex mapping is by definition zero strongly convex. But here, when you are mu strongly convex, so when you are more than strongly convex, it helps you to for the optimization because you can see that your mapping f is lower bounded by a quadratic term. The second type of assumption that we're going to make, or not, depending on the setting, is the smoothness. And typically, in the literature, when you look, what is common is to look at two smoothness. It means that your gradient is Lipschitz, or stated otherwise, that you can upper bound your mapping f by another quadratic term. So if you're at the same time mu strongly convex and too smooth, your mapping f is lower bounded by a quadratic term and upper bounded by a quadratic term. And both of these assumptions helps you, and you can get faster rates of convergence. And now the question is, can we use this kind of assumption in the stochastic online convex optimization with zeroth order feedback to improve rates of convergence? Yes?
Why do you use M2 square and not just like L or something?
So why do we have a square here? Because on the next slide, instead of having a 2, I will have something different, like a 3, and I will put a 3 here, just to scale, so that the problem scales.
Homogeneity.
Okay. It's, yeah, as Francis is very careful of, about homogeneity of your, of M. Okay, because if, yeah, that's it.
But why not mu square?
Yeah. Because, why about mu square?
Because the units are different.
Yes. Because here, no, because here, okay, I have no okay, so no, I mean, the true reason is that I'm not going to look at very strong strongly convex function where you can lower bound your mapping f by a polynomial of degree 3. But if we were doing this, like a lower bounded f by something which is on degree 3, you should put a 2 here. But here, as we are not doing it, we're not putting a 2. Okay? But that's a very good question.
Then we have to find another notation and it's complicated. And
okay, so if you want, just take your mu to be a sigma square. Okay? That's another crappy response. Okay? So just a picture if for people that are not used to convex optimization. So let's say you want to optimize the mapping in black, F, and being smooth means that you have a quadratic form. So this is a quadratic form, by the way, above your F. And being strongly convex means that you have another quadratic form in red below it. So here I want to, if I want to do a disclaimer, I can say that this is because of the the parallax. But if you are where I am, it's really quadratic. And so just
It's almost 420,
so I have to speed up. Now, so just a few words on this for those that are not that familiar with convex optimization. See, if you're at x, if you're algorithm at x, and you know that your mapping is too smooth, then you can make a big jump because you know that you can still query that point here. And if you query y, so you're at x and you query y, you know that your error is going to decrease by that quantity. So you can make big jumps. And if you are more strongly convex, it tells you that your mapping. So if you are lower bounded by a quadratic term, it tells you that. So if you think the minimum is around x, it is not going to be that far away because you know that the minimum is going to be on that part of the plane. So you can chunk a large part of the plane where you know that the minimum is not going to be in. So being strongly convex helps you as well as being too smooth.
no need to speed. I was making a joke about 420. It's a classical hour to smoke pot.
Okay, sorry.
Given your quadratic functions, I was worried.
Yeah. Anyway, so just to answer your question, Simon, why do you have a 2? Because for the classical notion of smoothness is being too smooth. Being too smooth means that your second derivative are bounded by m2 square. And it means that the difference between f and your Taylor expansion of degree 1 is a polynomial this polynomial in 2, of order 2. So here we're just going to say that f is beta smooth, with beta bigger than 2, if we have the same thing, but instead of looking at the Taylor expansion of f of degree 1, we look at the Taylor expansion of f of degree beta minus 1. And being beta smooth means that the difference between f and its Taylor expansion is smaller than y minus x to the beta. And if you don't know what is Taylor expansion in higher dimension, as I did, this is the formula, but let's get rid of it. So just remember that being beta smooth means that you're close to your Taylor expansion, okay, of order beta. And this is typically an assumption that, again, will hold for the function we want to optimize in machine learning. Think of a square norm or a log it. Anyway, so the aim is to use the fact that we know that f is really smooth, beta smooth, not only too smooth, to increase the speed of convergence. Just a few words on this assumption, being beta smooth. So it's kind of, if you look at this definition, if you're zero smooth, it means that you are bounded. So if you're convex and bounded, of course, it has to be on the compact set, otherwise you are constant. So if you're zero smooth, it means that you are bounded by m0. If you are m0 to 0, if you are 1 smooth, it means that you are Lipschitz, m1 Lipschitz. 2 smooth is the same definition, of course. And if you have a mapping which is beta 1 and beta 2 smooth, with beta 1 smaller than beta 2, then you are smooth for all value of beta between beta 1 and beta 2. And for the function I mentioned before, for the logistic regression, or the expected quadratic norm, then you can compute all those explicitly. You can compute explicitly all those mapping, all those quantity m beta to the beta. Okay, for instance, for logistic regression, m beta increase only linearly in beta, so it's pretty small. Okay, so it was just to mention on this assumption. And now, what are we going to do? And what are our objectives? So before going into the describing what are our objectives, let's do a bit of a review of literature of the classic optimization method. So the first one, if you're doing a convex optimization without noise and with access to the gradient, so it's not at all what we're looking here, but just to get some intuition. So if we're looking at, so you have access to the gradient, so you're looking at first order method, and there is no noise, we can find an optimal, and I put air quote on this optimal method to minimize the convex function, which is the ellipsoid method. So for those that don't know it, so let's say that at some stage you know that the minimum of your mapping f is in this ellipsoid in black. Then you create the center of your ellipsoid, you get a gradient. And then you know that the minimum of f is not going to be, since f is convex, on the left part of this ellipsoid. So you can just chunk this part of the ellipsoid, and you will know that the optimum is actually in the right part of the ellipsoid here. And the ellipsoid method is basically say, okay, instead of looking at this weird shape here, I'm going to expand it as find another ellipsoid that contains it, and I know that at the next stage, my minimum is going to be in the green ellipsoid here. And xt plus 1 will create the center of that ellipsoid, chunk half of it, and so on and so forth. And if you look at this algorithm, all of the sequence of ellipsoid you're going to build like this, the volume decrease by a constant factor, and so you will converge at a linear rate. But this has to be without noise. If you have noise, it's not working, so you have to create several times the same point, and it will never work with, or almost never work, I should never say never, it won't work with online optimization. So we will not look at that kind of techniques. Instead, we're going to look at gradient method, because gradient method works pretty well with online optimization. The gradient method, I don't know if anybody knows, but the algorithm is that one. So you have a constraint set x, and the gradient method, if you have don't have any noise and you have access to the gradient, is exactly that formula. Is that xt plus 1 is xt minus, and you're doing a gradient step. So you're querying at stage t plus 1 xt minus eta times the gradient of f at xt. And if you go outside your constraint set x, then you just project back on x, if you can do it. And this is so it's a very powerful method. And you can have explicit rates of convergence. So if your mapping are, if you don't have any assumption on your mapping f, except being smooth. So again, this is if you don't have noise, and if you are access to the gradient. So if your mapping is smooth, just smooth, no more assumptions as being smooth. So that means your Lipschitz. The rates of convergence is in 1 over square root of t. As I told you before, if you had assumption like smoothness and strong convexity, the rates of convergence are going to be faster and faster because it helps you. So too smooth, you will go from 1 over square root of t to 1 over t, which is pretty, so it's faster. And you can even accelerate this algorithm by using another actually algorithm and get a rate of convergence in 1 over t squared. So if you want smooth, instead of adding the assumption that you are too smooth, but you have the assumption that you are strongly convex, then you get a rate of convergence in 1 over t, well actually 1 over mu t. And if you add both assumptions, so if you have both smoothness and strong convexity, then the rate of convergence is linearity. And this tells you that when you add smoothness and strong convexity to your problem, you can converge faster than without just assumption. And so our idea is to do the same thing with stochastic optimization with zeroth order feedback. So zeroth order means again that you don't have access to the gradient, you just have access to a point, to the value function of f at a point. So now there is this, if you don't have noise, there is this trivial argument which is unbeatable that says that if you're in one dimension and you're trying to estimate the gradient of f, you just have to query f of x plus delta minus f of x minus f of x minus delta over 2 delta. And this is, if delta is equal to 0, or very, very small, this is exactly the gradient of f. This is totally true. But, so you can say that you could get the gradient of f for free just by using 2D queries, or D queries, depending on your algorithm. And so the rates of convergence will be the same, except that t is transformed by t divided by d. So this is correct when you don't have noise. But as soon as you have noise, everything about, I mean, this is no longer true when you have noise, because when you have noise, let's say you had an epsilon here, and we divide by delta, and so this blows up. So this idea is certainly true when you don't have noise, but when you have noise, you certainly don't want to use this, with delta equals to 0. There is, in the zeroth order method, there is a way to solve this kind of problem using really, so here you're trying to mimic first order method using zeroth order feedback, but there is a way to solve convex optimization using really true zeroth order method. And in one dimension, it's quite simple actually. So let's say you query those 3 points here, you query the left, middle, and right. And if you see that, without noise, if you see that the value of your function is like this, so the middle one is the smallest one, you know that the minimum of your function is going to be in that part of the plane. Okay, so you can remove the right part and the left part. Here, if the three values of your point of query are increasing, you know that the minimum of f is going to be on that left part of the plane here. So typically here, when you're doing free query at the time, you are able to split the remaining state space in 2. So this will give linear rates of convergence. And this is true in one dimension. You can say, okay, but you can do that because you can do binary search in one dimension, so it's easy. But actually, you can do that in a higher dimension, and you will get linear rates of convergence. But the issue is that the rates of convergence are, the dependency in t is t divided by d to the 7. Which is pretty slow when d is big. So we're not going to use that kind of method, but we could, but we're not going to do it. Here, the take-home message of these slides is actually what I wrote here, is that when you're going from first order to zeroth order method, you just multiply your rates of convergence by d, typically, okay? Because instead of needing one query to get a gradient, you will need d query to get a gradient, an estimate of the gradient. So going from first to zeroth order, you multiply your rates by d. So now if you add those into the picture, And if we look at all the cutting algorithms, such as ellipsoid, pyramid, and stuff, you have to create several times the same point to reduce the variance. And it's not really interesting, and it's not really working, actually. So instead, we're going to look at the stochastic gradient. So let's say that instead of observing your gradient, delta of f, you have a noisy version of this gradient. And the stochastic gradient is exactly the same as gradient descent, except that you don't observe this gradient, you just plug in the noisy version of your gradient. And there is a whole literature on this problem, that says that if you have an unbiased estimate of your gradient, that means that if the expectation of xi is 0, and its variance is bounded by d sigma square, see there's a square here, Simon, then you can get rates of convergence of the order of square root of d over t if we have a non-strongly convex function. And if we add the strongly convex assumption, then the rates of convergence increase from square root of d over t to d over t. And if you remember, I know it was quite a long time ago, if you remember the rates of convergence without noise, it was the same rate of convergence, except that instead of having a d, we had a 1. Okay, so it was square root of 1 over t and 1 over mu t. So typically when you go from noiseless to noisy optimization, what happens is, again, you multiply your rates of convergence by d. So when you go from 0th order to first order, from first order to 0th order, you multiply your rates by d. When you go from noiseless to noisy, you multiply your rates of convergence by d. So now the question is, what happens when you go from first order noiseless to 0th order noisy? Well, we expect that we multiply the rates of convergence by d and d, so by d square. And this is exactly what we are aiming at. So this slide is just a summary of what we know. So that's the first 3 columns. Okay, we know that that's the rates of convergence that we are aware of. That's what we aim at. Okay, so if we are looking at optimization, stochastic convex optimization, 0th order and noisy of a convex function, we're looking at, instead of having square root of t, adding noisy would be multiplied by d, having 0 is multiplied by d. We are looking at square root times d square over t, the same thing here. So that's what we would like to obtain. And that's what we get, which is not the same, I agree, but still, it's pretty much the same one, because as you can see, when beta is really, really big, takes beta to be infinity, as in the square norm or the log it, you see that as beta goes to infinity, so beta minus 1 over beta and beta over beta plus 2 is 1. So what we get is, we get rates of convergence, we match the objectives. It doesn't match when beta is small, so we just assume that the mapping is too smooth but not free smooth. It does not match for sure, but at least when the mapping are really, really, really smooth, we recover the rates of convergence that we are aiming at. Those. And just to finish the literature review, what do we know about this problem actually? So on 0th order noisy optimization. So we do know that this square root of t is the optimal speed. So we do get, we know that we can find an algorithm such that we get a rate of convergence in poly d divided by square root of t. But the issue is that we don't know the dependency in d. And here we really aim at having, for instance, in the convex, instead of having a poly d, we really aim at having only d. So if we had an assumption, if we assume that mapping is strongly and smooth, then we do get d square over t. That's a paper in 13, 14, don't remember. If we have only one of the two assumptions, strongly convex or smoothness, then we get rates of convergence t to minus 1/3. If you're only convex, t to minus 1/4. And actually, a paper of that year says that if you are only convex, you do get 1 over square root of t, but multiply by log t to the d. And this is, you can convince yourself that log, actually, when you look at that term, the dominant term is not square root of t, it's log d to the t. Okay, log is very small, but when you multiply to the d, it's very big. And I think when d is like 10, no matter what t is, for d, let's say 30 to be more careful. So when d is 30, log t to d is bigger than square root of t, no matter t. Why? Because I mean, just do the computation, okay? And you have, well, so it's true for all human t, okay? So if you take t to be infinity, then it's not true. But if you take t, which is, I think, I should have done it, I think it's, if you take t to be 10 to the 100, then it's still log t that dominates.
Okay, so it is
For all t that you can imagine.
the number of particles in the universe is a
Times the number of seconds that spent since the Big Bang, or I don't know. Okay, you can't take.
No, it's not homogeneous seconds plus.
Yeah, but I don't care for because it's in a log. Okay, so you don't have to be homogeneous. Anyway, so no matter how big t is, no matter the size of t that you can imagine, this is a log d that dominates, unfortunately. But still, it's a major breakthrough. And so when you have strongly and beta smooth, so there's this paper of Polyak and Sibekov in '99 that gets the more or less the same rates of convergence, but in asymptotic and without the dependency in D. So again, we are aiming at having exactly something that depends as d square over t. Okay, so that's our objectives. To get that rates of convergence, we won't be able to get them, but we can pretty close to it. How much time do I have? Do you know? Like half an hour, 10 minutes, 5 minutes? I have no idea.
20?
Oh. Okay. Okay. So how are we going to do that? Then we're going to. There is two tricks that we're going to combine, and the first one is rather known in that settings. It's just a way to estimate the gradients, and the other one is a way to smooth even more the mappings that are already very smooth. So here we would like to use a gradient method for our problem, but the issue is that we don't have access to the gradient. We just have access to the noisy value of f of x. So we have access to f of x plus some noise. But we have this this like very natural estimation of the gradient that I spoke about before. We know that in one dimension, f of x plus delta minus f of x minus delta over 2 delta is more or less the gradient of f at x, more or less. If delta is very small, this is true, and when delta is a bit small, this is almost true. But the thing which is quite surprising is actually this difference here is exactly the gradient of a function f, delta, which is almost f. So that thing is almost the gradient of f, but this is the gradient of a mapping which is almost f. And this is the gradient of f prime of delta, where it's f prime of delta, where f prime is that function. Okay? And if you look at it, it's just the expectation over the of f of x plus delta v over the ball, the unit ball. And so if we were minimizing f delta, we would have we can have an unbiased estimator of f of the gradient of f delta simply by drawing epsilon with probability plus or minus 1 with probability 1/2 and plugging g is z to be f of x plus epsilon delta times epsilon divided by delta, because that guy here, when it takes the expectation over epsilon of that thing, is exactly that thing. So the expectation of g is exactly the gradient of f prime. So this is unbiased of f prime of delta. So this is unbiased. And if you look at the variance of your estimator g, it's of the order of 1 over delta square. So now if you were to do a stochastic gradient descent with respect to f delta, since this is convex, then the rates of convergence are going to be 1 over square root of t times the standard deviation of your estimator. So it's 1 over delta. So it's 1 over delta square root of t. But here you optimized f delta instead of optimizing f. But since they are pretty close, they are delta close actually, your error is going to be of the order of delta plus 1 over delta square root of t. And if you optimize in delta, you will get 1 over t to the 1/4. And this is exactly the idea that I mentioned here of Flaxman and his co-author to do that. Okay?
Which is the idea of Nemirovsky.
And this is the idea of Nemirovsky and Yudin. Exactly. But I think, oh yeah, I remember that this is so this idea here is actually due to Nemirovsky and Yudin, as Francis says. So if we go from dimension 1 to dimension d, actually we have the same idea that says that if you look at the expectation of that guy here on the unit sphere, so remember in one dimension we are sampling epsilon over plus 1 minus 1, so it's sampling over the unit sphere on dimension 1. So if we sample u on the unit sphere on dimension d, and we take the same guy, then the expectation of that thing is exactly the gradient of f delta. So this is almost the gradient of f, but this is exactly the gradient of a mapping which is almost f. And so this is the gradient of f delta, where f delta is the expectation over the unit ball of almost f. And if you do the same computation, you see that the variance of that estimator is bounded by d square over delta square. And so if you do exactly the same trick, the same computation that here, exactly the same one, you get the rate of convergence of delta d square over t to the power 1/4. So as Francis says, this is a result, an ID due to Nemirovsky and Yudin, and then Flaxman and al, and then used again by Hazan and used by lots and lots of people. So we're not claiming that that's our idea, not at all. We're just using it. Our idea is to combine it with another trick. And the trick is to use a kernel to regularize our mapping. So why are we going to do that? Because remember that our mapping were very, very smooth. So that means that mapping f, remember that f was very close to its Taylor expansion. So f of x plus a small r is very close to its Taylor expansion. So it's very close to a polynomial in R. And it's close up to r to the beta. And now we're going to introduce a kernel, so a function k, such that when you integrate k against r, you get 1, and you integrate k against all the other polynomials, you get 0. And you can have explicit form for this kind of kernel, okay, for just here, you can compute them. So you have explicit form. And why should we do that? Because if you use this kernel and you integrate f against r times k, you see that that guy here is pretty close to f. Okay, and so we have a pretty good estimate of f, which is up to delta to the beta. Instead of having an estimate as before, when you do using this type of techniques, we have an estimate of the order delta. Here we have an estimate of the order delta to the beta of f. So we can use the fact that f is really, really smooth to smooth our estimates again by multiplying by k, and get a very, very precise approximation of f up to the order delta to the beta. So if beta is plus infinity, this is actually pretty small. So this is the idea to use this kernel. And now if we look, so if we combine both tricks, so if we're going to use an approximation of a gradient of the smoothen function. Okay, remember that said the trick of Nemirovsky said, okay, we can build an estimate of the non-biased estimate of the function which is close to f, and here we're going to do the same thing, except that the function which is close to f is going to be even closer to f than the standard estimate. And using the estimate is pretty simple. You're doing the same thing, so you sample v on the unit ball, and you compute f of x plus r delta v, and then you multiply it by r squared of r. So you integrate this against your kernel. And if you look at that guy here, okay, that's a function, and if you just compute the gradient of that function, the gradient of f of r delta is exactly given by that formula. And so this gives you an unbiased estimator of f r delta. And this unbiased estimator, so those mapping are pretty interesting because I said before, f delta is not only close to f, delta close, but it's delta to the beta. So here we have a mapping which is really, really close to f, and the gradients are also very, very close. The gradient of f r delta is very, very close to the gradient of f, up to the delta to the beta minus 1. And that's what the kernel allows us to do. And if you compute the kernel using those expressions, you can compute all those terms here numerically, and it's only something like beta square or beta maybe to the 3. Okay, so here the only thing which is a bit difficult, the main difficulty of these techniques is that the mapping here that we've defined, since we're using kernel, is not necessarily convex. So this is a kind of a bummer, but it's still mu strongly convex, or at least mu over 2 strongly convex, is f is mu strongly convex, and it's still convex if beta is equal to 2. But still we can still use it pretty efficiently to improve rates of convergence. We will just lose a bit of speed, but still we get asymptotical optimal results. Okay, so yeah.
confused that you say it's strongly convex if F is mu strongly convex.
So it's mu over 2 strongly convex is F is mu strongly convex.
It
Yeah.
also implies that it's convex.
Yeah, so if F is mu strongly convex, then F over delta is mu over 2 strongly convex, so it is convex. But if F is not strongly convex, then F over delta is not necessarily convex. Okay? But that's not a major issue actually. We just lose a bit in the speed of convergence, but that's okay. Instead of having a beta, okay, that's okay.
Excuse me, and why beta
Yeah.
is less than or equal to? We're interested in very smooth functions or...
So here, yeah, this is so that's not the selling point of the This is just a remark, okay? If beta is 2, then it's convex. But as we are looking for beta to be like 3, 4, 5, actually infinity, then it's not going to be convex. Okay? But still, so here is just a remark, and this is not very helpful for a problem, exactly. So now let's use both tricks. And what we're going to do, then we're just going to do stochastic gradient descent with respect to that estimator of our gradient. And so we have two main algorithms. One for when the constraint set X is compact, then we can query at each stage. We only make one query per stage, and we're doing this gradient descent. So that's xt is xt minus 1 plus minus a gradient step size times the estimate of the gradient of the smoothened approximation of f. Okay. And the other algorithm we're going to use is when X is unconstrained, so when it's let's say it's a world set to be RD, X is RD. Then at each stage we're going to make two queries, f of x1t and f of x2t, with independent noise. This is crucial because if noise are not independent, it's the same noise at all stages, and the noise will cancel out. But here we say that each time we make a query, we get independent noise. So the noise is still here. Just to be honest on that point, if you're doing, if we want to do online optimization, it means that we can query twice the same function ft to use that algorithm. So it can be discussed whether it's doable or not. If you assume that it's not doable, then use this algorithm. Okay. The first one does not use the fact that you can query twice the same function. It's only query only once a function.
So yeah, so you cannot do unconstrained if you cannot query more than once.
No. The issue is that when you just query once and you're looking at unconstrained optimization for on the online case, then you have an intercept that kills you typically. Okay, you can choose the intercept to be as big as you want or as small as you want, and this kills you. When you make when you can make 2 points, then you can kill the intercept, and then you can normalize your problem actually. But it's not about the noise. It's really about the intercept. So that's the main algorithm, and then the choice of all the parameters. So here the parameter is going to be a gamma of t, delta of t, r of t. All those choice of parameter are going to depend on the assumption we make on the function. If you assume the function are mu strongly convex or not, whether we're looking at constraint optimization or not, the choice of parameter will change. So I'm not going to detail all those choice of parameter, but for instance, if you're looking at mu strongly convex and constraint optimization, we have explicit choice of parameters. So so it's mu strongly convex. So the step can be chosen of the order of 1 over mu t. So that's a classic choice actually for mu strongly function. And the size of the exploration, because this is exploration, so delta t can be chosen on that order. Okay, and this is not that big. And at the output of the algorithm, we just output the average query point, so that's Pauliac averaging. And this algorithm gives an error with scale as we wanted in delta square over mu t to the power of so we have a power that goes to 1 when beta goes to infinity. So we do get an optimization error term that scale as delta square over mu t when beta is plus infinity.
So what's delta when beta equals infinity?
So when beta equals infinity, I think if I remember correctly, it's like a constant, because here we have beta beta factorial to the 1 over beta, so it's beta over e. So we have beta over e. So delta has to be delta. Yeah, it has to be pretty big. Maybe it's I think it's the order of the constant though. So yeah, typically it's a constant. But being really beta being really big is okay, because it means that you are really smooth, and so you can create so instead of creating xt, you can get a pretty precise approximation of your gradients by creating points that are far away from your original point. Okay, if you have a mapping which is think for instance that your mapping is linear, so it's not only convex, but if it's linear, then you can get a pretty good approximate of your gradient by querying points that are far away from x, right? But this is the same thing with a function which is really smooth. It's almost linear. The idea is that okay, you can query far away from your point to get a precise approximation of your point. Okay? For instance, another way to see it is if you're looking at the quadratic form. If you want to have a precise approximation of your gradient of the quadratic form, you can create points which are infinity at plus infinity minus infinity, and this will give you an estimate of your gradient. Okay. Well, that's the main idea. Now let's look at the proofs. So actually, so this slide is, so you see the next slide is like the most idiot slide you will ever see in your life, but it's just to make a point at the end of the talk, okay? So this is the whole proof of the precedent algorithm. So just see that it's only 6 main arguments, and it's actually pretty, when you're familiar with convex optimization, it's pretty natural. So when you look at it, I'm just going to actually emphasize the fifth point. So you're just looking at how xt moves away from x, and you use your algorithm to show that this is so you just expand it, and this is the standard form. Here you have an error term that you bound by using expectation, and you know that so that quantity here is small. Here you have this quantity in orange is by expectation more or less the gradient of f delta r. And so you can plug your gradient of f delta r here instead of this, and you get, using the strong convexity, you get that type of inequality. Okay? So now look at the first two terms. When you have the first two terms here, you see that you can rearrange term and divide by gamma t, and so that you get at the end the error made by f delta. Okay? So that you rearrange term, and you see that everything, so here you have xt minus x, xt minus 1 minus x, here you have xt minus 1 minus x. You're doing all your chemistry, and it's like standard algebra actually, and it's not that difficult, and you get that form. And here the idea is just, if you pick gamma t to be 1 over mu t, this term here in orange is equal to that one here in orange, and so all those terms is going to cancel out when you're going to sum. So all the terms are going to cancel out, and you will be left with the sum of all those guys. Okay, and this is exactly what we do here. So you have a sum of the remaining term, and that's it. Okay, so now that's if you do not follow at all, this is okay. This is I mean, I don't expect anyone to follow the last 5 sentences I made, but it's just to say that I'm not cheating you, and we arrived here at the point of the proof. We are here. Okay. And when you are in at this stage 5 of the proof of convex optimization, typically what we say is that, okay, so here I have so that quantity is more or less a constant, and what I have here is an average of a value function of a convex function, and I know that this is bigger than the value function of the average. Okay, so I'm using convexity of f here to show that that guy is bigger than f of the average, more or less. Okay, and this is the last step of this standard proof of convex optimization. But here, if we look more closely to this step 5, and you just remove that term because I don't care about it, and we just look at that guy here, what you see is this is exactly the regret. Well, more or less the regret. Okay, it says that delta t, instead of having f of delta t, is ft. Here you have the regret. Here in that quantity. Okay, it's the average of the cumulative loss compared to the average loss. Okay, so when you're doing a convex optimization, typically you say that you're using the last step of your proof is you use the fact that your function is convex to show that your regret actually is bigger than your optimization error. And so if you want to get results for the regret of online optimization, you just need to do the same proof, but instead going to the last stage, you just stick to the stage 5. So online optimization is you can do the same proof as convex optimization, except that you're doing one step less. Okay, so that's why I say online optimization is simpler than convex optimization, because you just need one step less in the proof. And that's the key point here of this slide. Is not detailing the proof because nobody can read it. Not even at I don't know what it is, like 5. But this is to show you exactly that the regret arrives here in the proof. And this is not much complicated to minimize regret than to minimize your estimation error. And also it shows you that the proof is not that tricky. Okay. Okay. Thanks. Well, so now if we're looking at instead of before I had a strongly convex and constrained optimization, let's say we're looking at unconstrained optimization, then we're going to use a two-point meta algorithm. Okay. So at each stage you're going to create x step minus 1 plus delta RTUT minus delta RTUT. You're doing the difference, and you add, so it has some noise. If you pick the same set of parameters, more or less, and you're doing the uniform averaging, you get the same kind of results. Okay, so you get the same results in constrained and unconstrained optimization, except that for unconstrained optimization, we need to be able to create 2 points, twice each function at each stage, so that we can kill the intercept. And okay, so here just to say that, so I don't have time, but if mapping a strongly convex, we can improve these rates of a bit. We can improve a bit these rates of convergence, but this is not really. It's not really relevant for now. So same thing, if we have only convex and constrained, you can choose other set of parameters. We do get the results, I'm not lying. And if you have convex and unconstrained, another set of parameters, just believe me or read the paper, but just believe me, I think it's quicker. And we do get the rates of convergence. So here was the objective of the talk. So remember, the first 3 columns are what is already known. We know that if we want to do convex optimization with first order noiseless, we have 1 over square root of t. If we add noise, multiplied by d. If we have zeroth order, multiplied by d. So we guess, I think we're not the only one to guess that if we add zeroth order and noise, we should have the optimal rates of convergence in d squared over t. That should be the optimal rates of convergence. Maybe in some natural problem. Okay? And what we get is that we do get those rates of convergence, but up to some power term, which goes to 1 and beta goes to infinity, which is the case we are interested in. If we look at mu strongly convex, same story, 1 over mu t, we get d over mu t, d over mu t, and then we think that the optimal rates of convergence is d squared over mu t, and we do get them up to some power, which is not the same one, but it also goes to 1 when beta goes to infinity. And this is true for convex optimization. And as I said before, I'm not lying. This is also true for online optimization. It's just the step 5. We won't go to step 6. We just almost stick to the step 5. Okay. And so you will get the same results for online optimization and convex optimization. And I think I'm on time. So I will skip here. So you have the objectives and the remaining results on this slide. Thank you.
Are there some questions?
So in the conjectures about the so is this assuming any kind of smoothness, two smoothness, infinite smoothness, no smoothness?
In the conjecture. So it's a conjecture, so you can assume. So it has to be a mu strongly convex. I don't know.
Because actually, there's a lower bound for too smooth and mu strongly convex functions where actually there's a square root.
For bandit.
No, even for zero order, the same setting that you consider. So stochastic zero order optimization of strongly convex and smooth functions.
Here you say, oh, yeah, but I think, if I remember correctly, it's one of paper, right?
Yeah.
So that's easier to.
To understand how it aligns.
Yeah. So the easy answer would say, okay, it has to be smooth, but I'm pretty sure that this rates of convergence is not in that setting actually, because here we are allowing. Oh yeah, because we allow to query outside the. We can query outside the constraint set.
The lower bound holds even if the domain is unconstrained. Okay, maybe we'll take it offline.
Huh? No, but I do remember that actually those two settings are not the same one. Okay, and so no, I don't remember why they are not the same, but they are not actually they're not the same settings.
But if we get square root, you take beta equals 2 on the right, we do get
Yeah,
square root.
Yeah, but
In the case you're right, we're optimal. In the case you're wrong, we have a good conjecture. So
Yeah, actually I'm slightly concerned that the lower bound construction uses a function which is actually more than two smooth.
yeah, because I think it's a quadratic function. But we had this.
then we have a disagreement.
No, because I do remember that we had this discussion in Singapore, but you were giving a talk and I said, okay, this is not the same setting. But I don't remember why it's not the same thing. But there is. So we could check offline. But this is actually not the same thing. And I think this is the idea. Because here, if you look at convex optimization, then you can get these rates of convergence. Okay, for convex optimization. With noise.
Okay, maybe we'll
We'll check them. But I agree that for bandit, this is why I say this is not bandit, and I know that was why you picked this square, because I know that if we are looking at bandit, this would be incorrect. Okay, we're not doing bandit optimization. For bandit, you will need the square root of t. I totally agree, and I think our setting are in between. I don't know the same setting as the lower one, actually.
So in the first line, our result is reading if b is smaller than 2, you get the right rate, and then on the right, the last one.
So that's if beta equals 2,
Yes.
the black one, and this is if beta is bigger than 2.
So that's when you don't have a convex FR delta.
Yeah.
But you can still prove.
Yeah, because doing the same proof actually. So if I just go to the proof, oops, sorry. Here, FR delta is still convex because we have a mu strongly convex function. But here, and you can see, I'm just using the approximation of f by f delta. So it should be FR delta here at the end. But if you use it at the beginning, then you can do the same proof with f instead of FR delta, and f is convex. Okay, so you do the approximation at the beginning, and then you get an extra error term that goes with your other way around. But you can still do it. Okay, we're not doing a gradient descent on non-convex function. We're doing a gradient descent on a convex function with some noise.
So somehow, if I understand where the magic comes from, is that you query very far, so that essentially the noise has a small influence on the measurement that you make. Is that the idea? Is that the intuition?
No, it's no. Delta is actually so. I'm pretty sure that if you do the computation correctly and beta goes to infinity, yeah, we get delta bounded. I think I'm pretty sure.
Delta goes to 0.
Not necessarily if beta goes to. Yeah, it can go to 0 very slowly, slower than the rates of convergence actually. But that's okay. So delta you can take the delta to be bounded. Now the thing is, if your mapping are really smooth, what you get is you have this bias variance trade-off, and if your function are really smooth, even with delta bounded, you can get a very small variance in. You can get an estimate of the gradient with a small bias, a very small bias at a fixed variance. Okay, you can lower the other one, of course, but your trade-off bias variance is improving when beta is improving. Okay, it's not really about noise. It's because it's really about the function you're optimizing. If it's really smooth, then you can get your variance is very small. You can lower the variance. Or lower the base, of course. It's always the same thing.
So you can interpret it as a variance reduction method.
It's funny because that was the question of Alex the last time. So I guess we could use a variance reduction method to improve those algorithms actually, practically. And
Bias reduction method.
And that's a bias reduction method.
There was another question?
Would it be more direct to suppose that F lies in Sobolev space?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mean so? That's a good question. We could make about on this optimization. We can also I think with this kind of assumption, we could improve the rates, those rates of convergence. For instance, if you assume that they are like same kind of ideas, you can assume that they are like polynomials of stuff like that, and it could improve the rates of convergence. I think you're totally right. If you make another set of assumption, like you mentioned, being a Sobolev space or even finite dimensional space, you can improve those rates of convergence and those techniques indeed.
For me, my motivation was a bit unclear. So you use a lot of smooth functions in machine learning.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, the first example that comes to mind is sigmoid function, but it's not differentiable. And people use some regularizing things like convolution with function with small support to regularize the sigmoid. But still,
You mean the Rolu?
well, not sigmoid. The function with step function.
Step function. Yeah.
Step function. Yes. Sorry. And it's the maximum of the gradient is like very high. I mean, if you try, it still will be infinitely smooth, but all these constants and beta will tend like to infinity. And
the question is, how is it going to increase? If you're trying to.
So my question is that. Usually these functions, they have like some singularity in a small compact set. Like there are some results of Mirovsky for adaptive algorithms when they work with such singularities in a small compact set. So for me it was a bit unclear what's the motivation to use like the maximum of the gradient or maximum of the beta derivative on the bounds. Like
I mean, like having.
I don't think your point. Logistic is infinitely smooth with bounded, like all bounded derivatives. So for me, logistic is enough of a motivation.
I mean, this concept is
Money-wise,
very
for,
big.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're using, I think if a correct question is, well, if I have a function, I want to optimize the function which is not convex, can I use an approximation of it which is infinity, which is not smooth? I mean, can I find an approximation of it which is infinity smooth, and then use that kind of algorithm on infinity smooth function to optimize my original function? Is that what you mean? That you have a function at the end, at the beginning that's not smooth?
I would ask what kind of example functions you apply these.
Well, then it's for the logistic function and all the functions which are the square norm, typically. Okay, that's if you have that's the main example.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree that if you have a function which is not smooth and you're trying to approximate it with a very smooth function, I'm not sure that this is the best idea to do that kind of.
But it's what Nestorf is doing with smooth optimization for non-smooth functions. It might be beneficial overall.
Yeah, but my concern is, as you said, if the better the beta is, you have to control all your m beta. I mean, all your derivatives are increasing, and typically, I want to say typically, but it's just pure random guess. Your m beta is going to increase more than you're going to lose more in your approximation than you will get from the rest of your agents. Okay, but that's pure random guess. So.
Okay, and I have one last question. What happens if you do not know beta in advance, or at least if you don't know the m beta?
So if you don't know m beta, it's actually not that bad, okay? Because here we just use it. Here we put m2 and m beta. But if you don't know it, just m beta, just take it for 1, for instance, and instead of having it inside this nice expression to the nice power, it will just go outside with like a 1 or a power which is not as nice, okay? So if you don't know m beta, it's okay. You just don't use it. If you don't know beta, then it's more tricky. If you know beta, which is if you know a lower bound on beta, then use your lower bound. It will be you will get the same result with a lower bound, because if you're beta smooth, then you're less than beta smooth if you're bounded, for instance. So if you have because we always assume that you are too smooth. So if you're too smooth and a large beta, but you just know for sure that you have this beta lower bound, then you can use the lower bound. It's okay. Okay, because of the argument I said before. If you're 2 and beta, then you're everything below. If you have no idea, can we find an adaptive algorithm? I don't really know. Okay, and since you can make a query, you just get 1 point. I'm not sure whether you can really get can estimate the beta fast enough. I'm not really sure. Okay, and I don't want to make any. I can make another pure random guess. I would say that no, you cannot estimate, but again, it's a pure random guess, so I'm not sure how relevant is it. It is. Okay.
Okay, so let's thank Yann again.